Thank you, Horst and Mitt, for that enlightening conversation. These are extraordinary times, as owners spend more time at their properties during this crisis. It is more important than ever to bring the mindset of creating excellence to the workplace. We are grateful for your insights, Horst. Over the past 2 days, we've heard from some of the top minds in our industry about what it will take to get back on the road to recovery. We've heard from association heads, brilliant analysts, government affairs professionals, industry legends, and more. But now, we're proud to bring you some of our association's most seasoned members to give you their take on this crisis, how we can address it head on, and what is in store for our industry. Please welcome Justin Knight, President and CEO of Apple Hospitality REIT, DJ Rama, President and CEO of Auro Hotels, Kenneth Fearn, Founder and Managing Partner of Integrated Capital LLC, Sima Patel, CEO of Ridgemont Hospitality, and our moderator, Stephanie Ricca, Editorial Director of Hotel News Now.
Hello, and welcome to Hotelier Insights, Recovery and Looking Past the Pandemic. My name is Stephanie Ricca, Editorial Director of Hotel News Now, and I'm your moderator for today's panel. Our panelists today are a group of hotel owners representing an incredibly diverse mix of properties and company structures, and I'm excited for our conversation. Let's get things started. I'd like to welcome Ken Fearn, Founder and Managing Partner of Integrated Capital, Justin Knight, CEO of Apple Hospitality REIT, DJ Rama, President and CEO of Auro Hotels, and Sima Patel, CEO of Ridgemont Hospitality. Hi, everybody. It is great to see you here on screen, though I'd much rather be seeing you in person, but we'll have to make this do for now and have fun anyway. So I shared name and title for each of you, but starting with Sima, I'd like to ask you each to take a quick 20 seconds and give the audience a quick profile of your portfolio as a hotel owner to help set the stage for our conversation. So as you do that, please let us know also the status of your portfolio today in terms of what's open, whether any hotels remain closed. Sima, start us off.
I'm Sima Patel. I'm the CEO of Ridgemont Hospitality. We are a small family-owned company. We are developers, owners, and managers of several branded and independent hotels in San Francisco Bay Area. I am happy to report all our hotels are open at this time. We did shut down 4 of our hotels and happy to reopen and happy to call our people back to work.
That's great. DJ.
DJ Rama with Auro Hotels. We have 6,500 rooms with 35 locations. We also operate in India, which is also an interesting side of the equation. And we closed 9 hotels, and all of the hotels are now open, and glad to have our associates back.
Fantastic. Justin, tell us the update on the Apple portfolio.
Certainly. So I'm Justin Knight, the CEO of Apple Hospitality. We're a large hospitality real estate investment trust with 233 hotels spread across 34 states and over 80 markets. Our hotels are generally within the Marriott or Hilton brand family, though we do have 1 Hyatt and 2 under construction we may talk about later. Our hotels are all open and have been, except for 1 that was forced closed by government mandate during the pandemic, though we have in some markets consolidated operations. And so in markets where we own multiple hotels, we have 18 hotels that have consolidated operations into other hotels within market in order to gain additional efficiencies.
Great. What a difference a couple months makes. Ken, how about you in the integrated portfolio?
Well, we're a small player. We're Los Angeles based. We had 6 hotels going into the COVID era. We had 2 hotels that were closed by government mandate, a hotel in Miami and a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And if you can believe it, we actually had a transaction with the hotel closing in July. So that we now are still moving forward, but looking for a post-COVID era to find some sense of normalcy, like I believe everyone is.
That is the order of the day for sure, and it'll be exciting to talk a little bit more detail about that transaction further on. Now, we will spend the majority of our conversation today looking forward, but I want to start by asking you a couple questions about the last few months, because this summer was in some cases, a real roller coaster for hotels, and it set the table for Q3 and Q4, even looking into 21. There was a lot of hope around drive-to demand leading into summer. The end of June and start of July had some demand bumps. Then cases picked up in hot spots, leveled off a bit. I'd like to ask you, how were June and July for your hotels? And was it enough to give you some confidence in how business may return? DJ, I'd like to ask you to respond first on this one.
Month of June, we finished at 31% occupancy. Month of July, we finished at 41% occupancy. So I think suppression of the virus equals recovery. And if we can't get our arms around the suppression of the virus, the visibility gets darker and darker. We went back to review our fourth quarter forecast, and we've shaved off about 30% revenue compared to where we were sitting. So it is a bumpy road, but we are laser focused in creating efficiency.
Sima, how has the summer been for your properties, and how is that performance factoring in to your forecast for the remainder of the year?
So just like everyone else, the entire industry being decimated back in March, we thought we'll be out of this in 90 days. And we planned, according to that, from dropping the RevPAR by 85% to now we are seeing about 59%, which is good. June actually showed some hope for recovery for us across our portfolio. In fact, some of our properties did break even that were opened by the market, by the airport market. However, first week of July brought new surge of cases in California, and that just has resulted in a pullback for us across our portfolio. And having been in 2 counties in California, the only 2 counties that closed the earliest and not fully open yet, it's created a lot of uncertainty for us moving forward. Just not sure how to forecast third quarter or fourth quarter.
Right, that word uncertainty is one that I think we've all really learned the true meaning of it and felt the true meaning of it. So this next question, Ken and Justin, I'd love to hear your responses to this. Where we sit now in the middle of August, and Ken, I want to start with you. What is your biggest worry for the remainder of 2020, but then follow that up with something that is giving you some hope or an indicator of getting through this next couple months?
Wow, I like that question. So for the rest of the year, our biggest worry is just that we won't see a pickup in demand. Our hotels are city center, so we rely heavily on group business and heavily on corporate travel. And we have not seen much in those markets to see signs of hope, including governmental travel, which has fallen off the cliff and by all accounts has a travel ban through the end of the year. Most corporate entities have placed travel bans on similarly through 12/31. So city-centric hotels have been very, very difficult and pragmatic as far as looking for demand. Our drive-to, we have a resort that's in Myrtle Beach, which is a drive-to market, and that has given us great hope for that market because the American spirit is one where people want to get out. They want to get out of their homes. They want to get back to senses of normalcy. It's that spirit, that fighting spirit to let's get back to what we do. And we've seen some pickup there. Myrtle was completely closed through the end of May for 6 weeks and came back well in June. Our weekend occupancy was as high as 95%. And then with the pickup in cases dropped back into the the 70s, but still above the mid 70s. And even with the hurricane coming last weekend, we were above 90%. Now, that's the weekend. If you take our cumulative occupancy on a monthly basis, we're still in the high 40s to 50%. But that market gives us some hope. For now, we're just not certain as to what the fall will bring, which is your shoulder, right? So it's a wait and see. As far as hope going into 2021, I think it's the best hope I have is that we find a vaccine and an ability to treat this virus and to manage it. And number one, and number two, that the hotel industry stays united in its messaging. One of the greatest experiences I've had coming out of this is I've had a long-standing great relationship with AAHOA in my role as chairman of NABHOOD, the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers. And we've worked so well with AAHOA and HLA and the Latino Hotel Association to really craft messaging so that the members of the Senate and the House and Treasury understand what's really happening in this industry. I think Sima said it. This industry has been decimated and has been left on an island of isolation. And we need to make sure that as a group, we stay united and continue with the similar messaging that keeps it in the forefront so that they understand what's going to be required to get us back on the right path. So sorry for the long reply, but that's where I'm at.
Well, that feeling of solidarity and actually moving together in step, I think will make such a big difference. So Justin, tell us quickly your biggest fear for the remainder of the year, but then follow it up with something that's given you hope.
I think my fear probably is similar to the fears that a lot of us have, and that's really largely related to the uncertainty. Not knowing is tough, especially in an environment that's been as volatile as what we've seen over the past several months. In terms of what gives me hope, we've seen strong relative performance from the assets that we own. In July, we anticipate that we will be cash positive at the corporate level. And really, what has been, I think, most eye-opening to me is that I think historically I've always had a great appreciation for our on-site teams and our management companies. They have proven that they are exceptional. And their ability to adapt and to find ways to service guests and to run more efficiently and do things better in this incredibly challenging environment gives me a tremendous amount of hope that as we find ourselves in better times in the future, that we'll be doing things better than we were before, and that this business will be even more profitable and beneficial for all of us on a go-forward basis.
That sounds like the ideal scenario. And we're going to talk a little bit later about some of those operations related issues and how they come back to owning and asset managing properties. But while I've got you guys in your ownership frame of mind, I just want to ask a question about development and transactions. You know, it's something that you think, how could this happen in the middle of a pandemic and recession? But some of you have mentioned that you've got some deals in the works, hotels in development right now. How has the process been, and what sort of tips can you tell some of the listeners on today's session who may be looking at transactions? DJ, I think you mentioned you've got something in the works.
Well, we have one under construction, and that was planned to open in October. I went to the bank and asked the bank that here's my forecast, here's my burn rate if we open this hotel. And the bank was very amicable to say, let's delay the opening, and it's worth paying the interest as opposed to opening and having a burn rate. So I advise anybody that's got a project in ground, talk to your bank, be transparent of what the burn rate is, and how can you open something in first quarter or second quarter of next year where there'll be more tailwind behind us with virus suppression.
Justin, how about you? You've got a deal in the works, I believe.
And we have several. So in March, we had 6 hotels under contract, and we developed through third parties. So not on our own balance sheet, but with a firm commitment to purchase the hotels upon completion. We closed on 2 hotels in April. And we have 2 that will close here shortly, and another that will close next year. We did, in the face of the current pandemic, cancel one of the projects that had not yet started construction. But similar to what DJ said, people were finding are broadly understanding of the challenges and the challenging environment that we're operating in. And where we did not have a need to go and approach our lenders specifically about projects that they were lending against. We have had incredibly valuable conversations with the brands who have provided guidance around how we should staff and bring people on in order to ensure that we have a smooth transition while preserving capital through the opening, recognizing that there'll be slower ramp for some of these hotels. Interestingly, the 2 that we closed on in April were immediately filled with business that was in the area, but have subsequently dropped to a more normal occupancy consistent with the remainder of our portfolio. The 2 that we have opening here shortly are on a college campus, and it will be interesting to see how the dynamics play out there as universities are working to figure out how they'll accommodate students in the new environment. But I think, to my earlier point, what we're finding is that that the challenges that we're facing create opportunities for us to look at things differently and explore opportunities that we may not have seen before. And we're finding that the groups that we work with understand the environment that we're in and are accommodating and willing to work with us.
I think it's exciting to hear those stories about, like you mentioned here, how hoteliers and owners and owner-operators are shifting their mix a little bit in terms of groups that they're targeting or how they're positioning the hotel in order to go after that business. And, Sima, I'd like to ask you about this because I know a lot of your properties are in the Silicon Valley area that was hit hard with loss of business transient, almost immediately. And I know that you've put some different marketing approaches into play to try and shift that mix to go after some business. Tell us about that.
So Stephanie, our hotel that we had to shut down back in March relied for 65% of the business from Google, and the tech companies not bringing back people till next year was really hard. It hit the industry very hard in Silicon Valley. We actually thought of repurposing the hotel. Somehow didn't know what to do. There's been a lot of new supply, strong brands. Almost every block has a new hotel in Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Cupertino area. So we had to really pivot our sales and marketing strategy. We opened all gates, all channels that we were not even looking at before, changing our strategy that way. Also, Visit California, which is a state tourism marketing organization, pivoted their marketing strategy to go local. And with California having so many good attractions and nice, beaches and things like that, there was drive-by market. Like Ken said, there's a great American spirit of family just getting in the car and going to nearby areas. So we pivoted our marketing strategy to go local, featuring Mountain View was one of the first to open dining, outdoor dining, patio dining, and we were able to bring that into our marketing strategy. And we are seeing some good results out of that.
So it sounds like a great example of, just being flexible and being able to pivot some of that business. So I'd like to talk a little bit about brands. Because, as we hear the good news about hotels reopening and travel picking up, at least sometime, some of that leisure travel picking up, there's also talk, and not just talk, but action from brands about things like cleaning protocols and mask mandates and new and different standards, whether they're short-term or long-term, coming from a lot of different angles in order to make guests feel safe. That is all wonderful, of course, from a guest perspective. As owners, I'm sure you agree it's wonderful, but then sometimes hear the price tag, doing that little cha-ching from the cash register in the back of your head. I'd like to hear from you about how those conversations are going with brands in terms of costs, perhaps influencing how these standards may change moving forward. Ken, how have your conversations been with your brand partners on some of these new initiatives?
I think we've had very direct and open dialogue about the need for it, and so far it's been well received. It's been well received by our colleagues who are at the hotels. Our hotels are typically within the Marriott family at this moment and the Hilton family, and the guests have been comforted by what they're seeing as well. So to date, it's all working beautifully. We feel comfortable. Our guests feel comfortable. Our colleagues feel comfortable, and I think the guests are feeling comfortable. I think the test will be if we start to see rising occupancies, where the pivot goes from there. And we're not at that point yet. That's where I think the interesting discussions will start to really develop.
Because once you see that rising, then it's a little bit tougher to offset with some of those other initiatives,
That's right.
social
That's
distancing
right.
and cleaning and so on. Let's move the conversation. Oh, yeah.
I can give you a great
go
example.
ahead.
We had a wedding. We actually had a wedding in our Atlanta property that was slated to be several hundred. It was a DJ. It was a big Indian wedding, and we had a number of folks cancel, and they couldn't get the visas to come over because of the pandemic. This was literally about 2 weeks ago. The attendance dropped to, I think it was about 30 people from several hundred. We continued to do everything. We spread everything out. We did all the social distancing. Everyone who was there was overjoyed. But again, what happens when you really can start to move things along and you have 300-400 people, and how are you going to affect pulling off an event in a manner that makes everyone comfortable, colleagues, guests, everyone, and do it in a manner that this industry has been known for, which is providing the best service and hospitality.
That's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what'll be facing as hotels continue to reopen and as that business ramps up. So it's a perfect segue to talking about consumer behavior. We hear so much about those consumer preferences regarding hotel stays and how they've changed, whether those preference changes will be short term through the pandemic or whether they may turn into long-lasting actual trends that really shift how hotels do business. With that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about what elements of the hotel experience do you truly think can change to the benefit of the owner with little impact to the guest? And so for that, I mean, what are some of these elements that may be something you may not necessarily need to pay as much for moving forward, but that can still preserve guest experience in a hotel? Justin, what are some conversations that you find yourself having with your team and brands about this?
It's interesting. We've spent a lot of time both internally and in interacting with the brands, thinking about what the hospitality model of the future might be. And as we've looked for ways to maintain the value proposition for our guests, recognizing we're going to be entering into a more competitive environment, while at the same time reducing expenses. Our focus has really been around those services and amenities which are utilized least frequently, but that have significant costs associated with them. And I think for certain brands, that's caused us to focus on evening socials, where the take rate is generally less than 20%, even sometimes less than 10% of total guests that are staying at a hotel. Outside of that, I think we're looking at how we might provide the same services, but maybe in a different way. And when we look at food and beverage, trying to explore ways that we might find savings there, it's often not whether or not we'll provide an offering, it's how we provide it, how large the selection might be. Are there ways that we can gain incremental efficiencies by having similar products across brands within larger brand families, such that we're able to use scale negotiation to bring pricing down without having impact on what the guest receives. And then, there are other areas where guest preferences may change, and what they want could be different in a way that actually benefits us from a cost standpoint. And some of that remains to be seen. The guests that are traveling now are not necessarily indicative of the guests that will travel in the future. Guests traveling now tend to be less risk averse than those who aren't traveling now. But they will make up a portion of the traveling public on a go-forward basis. And so we're looking at things like housekeeping and how we might provide that differently in the future in order to offset some of the incremental costs associated with the new cleaning standards, in order to ensure a safe environment for guests and employees, but also potentially savings beyond that.
Mm-hmm. DJ, I want to direct this question to you. The industry has spent years building up this exact value proposition of great experience, great authenticity. Sometimes we can translate that as amenity creep. How do you still offer those things like experience and authenticity without spending money on them or losing money on them?
Well, I think first of all, we're in the business of providing experience through our people, and that's what hotels are all about. And obviously, what Justin just eloquently explained, we are all sitting across the aisle with our brands and saying, what are the pieces that are critical and what are the pieces not critical? And it's no different when you go to Europe. Help me find a free breakfast in Europe. And it's a very challenging, but then there's some brand hallmarks in this country that breakfast is part of the value proposition. So I think we're at this pivoting moment right now that we will have to challenge each other with the brand standards, and we will have to make some seismic change. Also, at the same time, cost of acquisition, which is OTA with our brands. I mean, that's another hot topic. That's not impacting the customer, but at least the retailer, the merchant, that how do we renegotiate with them? And this is the best time that we have to do. So I urge all the owners to push our brands to make some hard decisions now.
Well, in this period of time, I think there is that window of opportunity with everybody facing the same thing that may move the needle there. Now, I know that we could go on and talk for hours and hours. Unfortunately, we're coming up close to the end of our session, so I have two questions that I'd like to close with. And for both of these questions, I'd like to hear from each of you on it. Now, we're at the point of the year where you're looking forward, constantly forecasting and revising those forecasts. That is tough to find visibility when clouds are so heavy right now. Yes, there's definitely a meteorology analogy to be made here. I'd like to hear from each of you about where you look. What indicators are important for you and your business right now? Maybe that's a hotel or a travel metric that we're used to. Maybe it's an economic metric. Maybe it's something different. What do you look at to help give you a little bit of visibility when you look forward? Ken, start us off on this one.
We've been trying to see if there's any messages we can glean out of pace for transient customers, to see if we can start to see a pickup there. even through the OTAs and how that's coming along. Very difficult to look at to find clarity though, and we're struggling mightily when we look out for the fourth quarter to try and get our arms around where we're actually going to be headed.
Justin, how about you?
Historically, we've looked at things like GDP and employment rates and things of the sort. And what we found in this environment is there are correlations that historically existed don't exist in the same way. And that's in part, I think, because the current crisis is one part economic crisis and another part fear and medical crisis. And those have combined in a very unique way. For us, we're finding ourselves tracking trends in occupancy over time. And we have a large enough portfolio that we're able to compare different markets and find those similarities and differences, which tend to correlate to that. But because even forward booking pace in today's environment is less reliable than it used to be, we're really using our current performance as an indicator of what we might see in the future.
It's amazing how your thoughts and strategies change around the different metrics available. Sima, what indicators are you looking at when you project the rest of the year and into 2021?
So we are a small company. We have 50% of our hotels are near the airport. So definitely the airport traffic, which picked up in June. However, like I said, it pulled back again in July. So hoping to see the air traffic go up and consumer just feeling confidence. For me, the big one is consumer confidence index. I think people need to feel safe to travel again, to get on a flight again. Our CBD hotel, we just don't know what to expect in a heavily convention market, and we're not even attempting to find solutions there. We're just kind of staying afloat there. So different segments. Our extended stay market's been really good with a lot of the first responders, frontline workers, and trickle just a little bit inkling of business travel. We are seeing very, very small and small meetings. So being hopeful, but looking at the vaccine, how the health crisis pan out, and if the airport travel goes up.
A lot of balls in the air. DJ, how about you?
So I agree with all of my colleagues' statements, and I would like to add a few items to this. One is we are looking at daily room night pickups for the future. So every morning I get this report and I say, okay, we picked up 1,200 rooms last night. It's interesting, the waves are coming in and out. So I urge each one of you to stay focused on your daily pickup for the future and how that's reacting. The other one is TSA data points for your airports, seeing what the traffic and the trend is at the TSA checkpoint, which is a public knowledge on the web. So you can at least see what the movement is for corporate transient. Another one that's interesting is the vacancy office rate. What we're finding is that a lot of the office renewals are coming up and a lot of them are not buying that kind of square footage, which impacts us on corporate transient. So that's an indicator that we should just keep an eye on. Our office, are they renewing their lease? And we got to be very mindful of that. And obviously unemployment rate, GDP, those are all the usual suspects, but I think we have to unturn every stone to make sure that we can see the visibility for tomorrow.
One last question, and this is definitely a lightning round. I'm going to start with you, DJ, and we're going to close it out on a fun note. I want you to tell me one thing you're doing that's getting you through this time. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's eating, maybe you've learned a new hobby. Keep it quick and tell us what's your thing, DJ.
I'm walking 10,000 steps every day, and when you walk outside 10,000 steps, it just gives you a refresher of what's the purpose of life? Are you happy? What do you want in life? And I think these are all retrospect questions that we're all asking each other. And also for our children, what are we going to do? And what is the learning out of this, and what are we going to leave for our generations to come?
That's fantastic. Sima, how about you?
Well, I'm fortunate to live in an area where there's beautiful outdoor spaces, and I've been hiking uh, outdoors a lot, exploring the open space around our house. Also tapping into my mother's and grandmother's recipes, and attempting to cook some of those dishes. That's been very helpful.
That's a great one. Justin, what's getting you through this?
I think connecting. So finding unique and different ways to connect in the current environment is getting me through. Really, it's having friends, family, and now having a greater appreciation for them in an environment where it's more challenging to get together with them.
That's fantastic. Ken, take us home. Tell us how you're getting through all of this.
I've been getting through it with a lot of exercise. So I start my day very early in the morning and do a couple mile run and a little yoga, and that gets me through the day. And the rest of it's just family. Really, with everyone home, we have kids. Our youngest is a rising junior in the hotel school at Cornell, and with our kids coming home and our older son and his daughter-in-law, we've had a lot of family time that we'd kind of forgotten about because everyone had kind of flown the nest, so to speak. So the best thing about it is this reconnection with your family and your kids and your friends, and realizing that as Justin was saying, that connectivity that you have with friends that you may have forgotten about. So very appreciative of that and family.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today, and thank you to the audience.